Salmon is an interesting fish, so it has captured the mind of fishermen for millennia. Whether you are a coarse fisherman or a fly fisherman, salmon is a noble fish. And over the past 50 years or so, salmon has been developed as a commercial fish through commercial farming, and it has been very much pushed through our diet over the past 50 years more than before. The industry is very much commercial. It is between producers and processing centers and consuming chains. And on the producer side, we've got some very old traditional production areas. So those production areas are mostly Northern Europe, so Norway very much in particular, but also Denmark, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Ireland, Scotland, for example. And some of the firms who act in the producing side are very interesting firms. They are very old, traditional farming families that have developed into monstrous companies that are more or less listed nowadays. So an industry that has started from very humble origins to becoming very financially represented on financial markets, for example. When we come to the processing side or the consumer side, the processing side in Europe is mostly in the Netherlands, Germany, Poland, but also France, Italy and Spain. We went, for example, to visit one of the big processing centers in Urk in the Netherlands, and it's very interesting because it's an old traditional fishing village that has developed into the processing capital of Europe, if I may put it that way. And you see firms just one after the other competing with each other, but also helping each other. And it's a very interesting setup because you can see the tradition, but you can also feel the element of competition and proud as well in the process. And then in terms of final consumers, we have the big chains in Europe I'm going to mention some names that are going to ring a bell. It's going to be the Carrefour in France, or the Picard in France, or we could talk about the Lidls and Aldis in most of Europe. And if we spoke of the UK, it could be your Waitrose or it could be your M&S. So it's a very integrated chain in that sense. We've been involved in salmon for the past 6-7 months, and it's been a big learning curve for us. So we've had to get to know who the main players are, and we've been quite well surprised by how well structured the industry is. In terms of processing, it's extremely efficient. So we went to visit some of the processors, and I was expecting a massive machinery and huge amounts of fish and so on, and we realized that it's actually smaller than we thought because it is so efficient. And it is efficient because it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be quality oriented, and the process is very strict, very regulated, and also so organized that it is extremely efficient. We were surprised by the fact that in a small square area, so many fish are processed. And they're processed in 3 different ways. They're either processed for fresh fish, or for fish that is going to be smoked, or for frozen salmon. So in a way, to make it simple, 3 processes in one, and very skilled workers, very advanced machinery, and overall a process which works really, really well. In terms of challenges, quality is one of them. The farming industry has been criticized for quite some time by environmentalists. There's been some concerns about the impact between wild salmon and farm salmon. Regulators have gone involved, especially in terms of lice infestation, for example. And also the environmentalists will or have made a fuss about the high mortality rate in some of the farms. So there's been some concern about the welfare of the fish and how that welfare of the fish goes into our food chain, for example. So when we look at the industry, it's an industry which has been going on for sometimes more than 100 years, but it has been really developed over the past 40, 45 years. It's only in the early 1980s that Norway made an effort to get to Japan, for Japan to consider salmon as a sushi, and it has been a success story in that sense. So that success story means that we have millions of meals which are coming out of salmon, but the criticism is about the fish welfare, about the lice control, the impact on the wild population and vice versa. And we've seen some very good developments in terms of trying to alleviate those concerns with farms, for example, in Ireland, going 100% organic and introducing some other fish species into the farms for those fish species which are cleaner fish like wrasse or like lumpfish to basically eat the lice and make the farmed salmon population healthier. And that development has started to grow into the other farms in the rest of the world, and it's becoming a process in order to guarantee the welfare, but also to be able to satisfy the regulator that we can control the lice issue, for example. The important bit in the history of salmon is the drive from Norway to create salmon as a sushi. So for me, if I go to a sushi shop, seeing salmon as a sushi is obvious. But when you look at it historically, it's actually quite new. It's 40, 45 years ago that it started to happen. So it has been extremely successful in that sense. In terms of adaptation to criticism, I think that it's about marketing, but it's also about proving to the world that it is a viable fish for food process. We have a worldwide population that continues to grow. Salmon and fish in general is a wide part of our diet, and the development of salmon for food in terms of farming has to have a growth, and we see that growth when we go and visit clients. We see that we face very large companies, but those large companies are competing with each other in a manner that is very apparently showing that there is still space for an awful lot of space. So I think that over the next few decades we're going to see more farming groups on board, we're going to see more groups on board, and we're going to see more end users using salmon in all its various forms. So that has been the element for us to get involved, and it's been a very interesting journey for us over the past 7 months or so. So Fishpool used to be under Nasdaq, and at some point in 2024, Nasdaq indicated that it wanted to ditch the contract, and Euronext took it over. So there was a transition period where the trading in salmon derivatives dropped because of this transition from Nasdaq to Euronext. And when Euronext took over, Euronext naturally contacted StoneX, as we are one of the main participants on Euronext. We represent 20 to 25% of what goes on in agricultural products on Euronext, and it did make natural sense for us to get involved and to look at this niche market. So for us, the appeal is the fact that it is a niche commercial market. The history of salmon is somehow very similar to the history of StoneX. Our firm is 100 years of age. We started from very humble origins, going to sell eggs from door to door to become the monster on Nasdaq we are today. And when we look at the salmon industry, it's very similar. It's traditional farming or processing firms that are over 100 years of age, and they've become some of the largest contributors to some of the exchanges in terms of market capitalization. So a very similar story, and that parallel means that it makes sense for us to look at this niche market. Also, as Euronext looked at taking over salmon from Nasdaq, the expertise has been transferred. So the Fishpool team, which was independent with Nasdaq, is now completely integrated with Euronext, and that Fishpool team has got over 15 years of experience. It's a market which is already mature. So it's not like we're going into a market where there's everything to build. There is already a client base, there is already interest, and for us is to get involved into this niche market, but also see how we can contribute with Euronext to take it to the next level, i.e. bring new participants. And this is something that we've already started to see with us looking at existing former Nasdaq Fishpool clients who are now Euronext Fishpool clients coming to us as a clearer, but also looking at bringing new participants. In terms of functioning, it's very much a broker market, so it is voice brokered. It's a market that is very different to Paris Wheat, for example. So Paris Wheat is quite fast-paced. Euronext Salmon is very slow in the sense that people might give us an order on the Monday. It might take us the week to get it through. So it's a process. It's much more of a market where a broker needs to be involved, needs to get the counterparty, needs to have those discussions about negotiation to get the deal through. And in terms of functioning, it's a very different functioning than in other Euronext products, in the sense that on Euronext everything is, for wheat, for example, on screen, and you can buy, sell at any time. If you look at the board on Salmon, it's a very empty board. It needs the required work to get the process in place for trading, but it's also a different element of pace, because the producers and the consumers will look at contracts which are not necessarily per month or expiry, but per quarter or per half year or for the full year. And the reason why, it's because it's a very commercially oriented process. And when a processor, for example, in Poland buys salmon from Norway and they sell it to their local distributor in Poland, the local distributor will require a yearly fixed price, and that puts the processor at risk, and therefore that creates that hedging requirement. So our role is primarily a role as a clearing broker. So clients used to be able to go to Nasdaq, trade salmon straight away. Through Euronext, you can't just trade straight away into the product. You need to have a clearing member through whom you're going to execute your trades. So that's the first element. We're one of those clearers. So beyond that, we offer clearing, we offer execution, but we also offer something that maybe others won't offer, which is the FX and the global payment. And that is quite crucial for people in the commercial spectrum of the salmon industry. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you are a Polish processor selling your salmon in zloty, and you have to buy your salmon in Norway in NOK. So you have a NOK exposure, a zloty exposure. You might export to the rest of Europe in euros. You might export to the US in dollars. So you are going to naturally have those FX exposures. We can cater for them. And also, we can also do the delivery in the actual currency through our global payment capacity. So that differentiates us to another broker who might just offer clearing and execution on salmon. We can be much more comprehensive in our service offering. The other element that is important is that we have experience on Euronext. We've been involved on Euronext for decades, but we also have experience in niche markets, whether it is Euronext niche markets or others. We are very well involved in Paris maize, which is a smaller contract on ice feed wheat, for example, or for example, we could mention also Minneapolis wheat. So we have a history of committing ourselves to niche markets, and we welcome the arrival of Euronext Salmon on the Euronext platform for us to look at a niche market, commercial market, and apply our expertise as to how to approach the client base, but also how to try to expand it. And I think this is one of the elements that we can bring to the industry and also to Euronext by trying to market the product, market the futures, and look at who in the industry has never hedged, do that education, bring more participants to the board. And it is important because it means that it reassures the existing client base who know that there is a market participant like ourselves who looks to develop the client base and bring more people to the table, and eventually that's going to help bring price transparency and also liquidity, so that we don't necessarily spend a week for a deal. We might spend a few hours or a few minutes.